our guests here, and I think they're all ready to go, and I'll run the mics if it's too loud or not loud enough. You guys let me know.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming. This is a great turnout. Thank you. Then it's early, and it's a Monday night, and so wonderful. We come here to talk tonight about our children. As parents, as teachers, as educators, as administrators, our children and educating them the best we know how is probably the most important thing. You know, when you move to a new town, what's the first thing you look for? Where the best schools are. You have kids that are schooling. So we all know that it's important. We know that it's important to our state to grow our economy. We need to have people who are trained and skilled. And unfortunately, what we've seen in the past 3 years has been in the wrong direction. And there are many things that have caused that. And as you know, there's been a huge tax shift from business to everybody else, and a big cut to education. And I don't know, probably most people in this room feel that that was the wrong way to go. All the polls show that everybody feels that we should be investing in education. Whoops, what's that? Okay, all right, I won't worry about it. And we'll talk some more about some of the other changes to the schools, but I'd like to first introduce our panel. To my far left, I have Deborah Griffin, and Deborah she has children in the Muskegon School District, which is my district. Jeff Bowman is an Oak Ridge Public School teacher. My immediate left is Senator Gretchen Whitmer. She's a leader in the Senate. She came all the way from Lansing tonight for this, so it was very important to her as well. She has children in school, and she's one of those leaders that always has the right thing to say and says it strongly. And to my right is Steve Kedlovitz, Fruitport Schools board member. So we tried to get a balance of different interests. And so what we're here to do tonight is to share with you the task force report that was produced by the House Democrats over the summer. Quite a number. Let me see. 1, 2, 3. Well, I'll tell you there. Ellen Cole-Lipton was the chair. Teresa Abbott from Red Ledge, Terry Brown, Doug Geis from Taylor, John Piccola from Marquette, for all representatives. Our own Representative Colin Lamonte from Montague, Representative Stacey Irwin Oaks from Saginaw, Representative Rutledge from Superior Township, Representative Andy Shore from Lansing, and Representative Stalwart from Detroit, and Family Adams and Zemke from Ann Arbor. So it was a huge task force. They met with, take a look at the people, the experts that they met with. It's a very impressive list, and it's on this page, just one page in, for those of you who have it. How many of you, I only have brought 30, because that's usually what we get, please, but it looks like we got a much bigger turnout. So I apologize for not having more. So maybe those of you who have them can share with your neighbors. But we'll be talking about it. You don't have to have it in front of you. So they met from May to September with all of these educators, researchers, professors, experts in the field, university presidents, superintendents. And mainly, what they wanted to do was find out what people were concerned about, what some of the changes have done, and they came up with some solutions. They don't believe that Rick Snyder's solutions, or his Educational Achievement Authority, for example, is one of the right solutions. There are many other bills that have been passed that are part of what's happened to our education system. I'll just summarize very briefly. The plan that they came up with calls for study and follow-up actions, and they include these things. Legislation requiring a comprehensive study of the true cost to educate a child in Michigan public schools. Studies have been done in other states. I believe Pennsylvania, it's somewhere around 12,000 students. We're way below that here in western Michigan, as you know. We're hanging around 7,000, so that's a big difference. But that study, that has to be replicated and has to be done here. Ensure that as a result of the study, the specific needs unique to a particular district are addressed and properly funded. These needs would include transportation, special education, English as a second language, dealing with poverty, early childhood education. So assessing what the community already has, what kind of needs there are, and then what that costs. And the third thing is a constitutional amendment, and this was proposed by Representative Colleen Lamonti. Constitutional amendment to guarantee that school aid dollars are protected and used only in our public school for education through high school. Okay? As you know, one of the first things that the Snyder administration did was take money, a large chunk of money from the public school system and give it to higher ed. Now, we all know higher ed needs to be funded too, but that was a huge blow to K-12 education. And then there's another three more recommendations that are associated with leveling the playing field for public education. Those of you who are focused on making sure our public education system is strong, and I suspect most of you who come here would agree that these would make a big difference. The first is disclosure of the amount of taxpayer dollars actually spent on the classroom instruction, including the cost to provide instruction in a virtual school or over the internet. As you know, virtual schools, when that bill passed, they're getting the same funding as schools with buildings and all sorts of offices and special education and all the extra things that we provide in our public schools. A virtual school does not have to provide, but they get the same amount of money. So that's number one. All schools, public, charter, and virtual, must have school boards that comply with the Open Meetings Act and hold their meetings in school communities at times and places that are accessible for parents. And then finally, that no group with the ability to authorize public charter schools will be allowed to authorize new charter schools if any of the existing schools fall within about 5%. And that is happening. Authorizers with poor performance are getting charters, and this recommendation says that's not the way to go. So I think at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Gretchen Whitmer, and she has some comments, and we'll go from there.
I just wondered if there was anything in the recommendations in terms of really leveling the playing field, so our kids in Muskegon County, who are usually at the bottom of the state aid, get the same as the kids in West Bloomfield who are already born with a silver spoon in their mouth.
Right.
Can't hear.
What she's saying is that Dwayne's recommendations address the disparity between the 7,000 that we get around here and some of the other districts that get a lot more. And I don't believe this addressed that. We've had lots of discussions about it, but I don't believe that's in here. Not to say that wouldn't be tried.
She's got another one. She's ready.
I'll just take the microphone. Is this on?
I'll turn the microphone.
Is this on now?
Okay, good. Yeah. All right. Well, first of all, I want to say, thank you very much for inviting me to be with you tonight, for welcoming me back here to West Michigan. I actually grew up in Grand Rapids, so any chance I get to head west, I jump at it. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight. My card says Senate Minority Leader, and I often laugh at that, sometimes cross it out, and that's because Michigan is a state that's neither red nor blue. We go back and forth. We're a state that wants leadership. We're a state that wants voices for the people and for the children in our education system and for the grandparents who are worried about their grandkids in our education system. And so when I get an opportunity to come and talk about education, that really is the number one issue that constituents in my area are asking me to fight for. And I suspect, because of the turnout tonight, that my area is not that much different from your area. And coming from East Lansing, obviously I've got a big university in my backyard. But that's not what drives the passion for education. I think it's an understanding that education is not simply an investment. I mean, it's not simply an expense. It's an investment. Every dollar we invest in education, we get returns over and over again. Whether it's returns in a high-quality job or kids staying in the state of Michigan, we get enormous returns for investing in education, and that's how we need to talk about education. Now, I will say that in all the years that I've been in the legislature, and that's 13 years, which in an era of term limits makes me the longest-serving person in Lansing right now, I've never heard a governor or a colleague of mine say that they're in favor of cutting education. I've never seen a campaign that didn't include a core message on the need for better education. But what we've seen the last 3 years is unprecedented cuts to our schools, to higher education, all the way down to our K-12 schools. For what? Where have those cuts gone? Now I'll tell you, the first year of the Snyder administration, and I go back to, I start with John Engler. No one else can say that in Lansing right now. He was an education governor compared to the one that we have right now. And I'll tell you, I had my disputes with Governor Granholm, even though we're on the same side of the aisle. I didn't like some of the education changes that she pushed. We need to not just cut the pie differently, we need to make a bigger pie. We need to make education a top priority in the state of Michigan. So in the first year of Governor Snyder's tenure, they cut education over $1 billion. They took $1 billion out of our school aid fund. Now, for those of you who remember voting on Proposal A, part of the sales pitch was that we would ensure that these property tax dollars were going to go to our local schools. No one ever said, maybe they'll get diverted into higher education. Now, I don't know if I necessarily would have been opposed to it if it had just gone to education. But what it did was go to backfill a hole created in the general fund so that the governor could pay for business tax cuts. Now, we changed our business tax code. The promise of jobs has not come to fruition. And here we are with schools where class sizes are growing. We've got buildings that are tumbling. We've got more and more onerous requirements on our brick-and-mortar buildings and teachers where the most important asset in our schools for our kids to learn. But now we are seeing move towards cyber schools, move toward pulling even more dollars out of the schools that we have. That's not a prescription for how we're going to move the state of Michigan forward. If we are going to move forward, we've got to have the best educated workforce in the country. The economists all over the country will tell you the most important consideration for a business when determining where to locate. It's not the tax structure. It's not even whether or not the police and fire are going to show up when you have an emergency. It's not the roads. The most important consideration is whether or not you've got the workforce to do the jobs. So what we've seen and what has been so neat about one of the things that has happened, a success story, is the Kalamazoo Promise. Now, I know you are all somewhat familiar with the Kalamazoo Promise, but in studying, in determining we need to have a proposal to go forward. It's not good enough to be against what's happening. We have to have a vision for where we want to go. And that's part of what Marcia talked about as the House Democrats have put together. One of the things that on the Senate side that we've done is put together what we call the Michigan 2020 Plan, which is modeled after the Kalamazoo Promise. We talked to economists from around the world. They told us what? They told us the most important thing is concentration of talent. When you look at other Midwest states. You look at Minnesota, and you can juxtapose it to Indiana. Indiana's got the lowest taxes in the nation. They also have the lowest number of people that are actually getting higher degrees. They have the highest number of people requiring state assistance. There's a dramatic change in Minnesota where they don't have the most favorable tax code for business, but they've got the best educated people. Per capita income is higher for everyone in every walk of life because all boats rise as the level of the water goes up. And so it's really something that we wanted to model after. We said we need to compete with Minnesota. We need to offer higher education to every kid in Michigan. And we put together a plan. The fun part is that the way we pay for it, which, by the way, the numbers are eerily similar to the tax dollars that we gave away to business in the first 2 years of the Senate administration. The way we pay for it is if we can find 5% savings in what we call tax expenditures, and that's just a fancy way for giveaways, taxes that we don't collect on certain businesses because of their special area. They got special treatment under the tax code years ago. We could find 5% savings. We could fully pay for all 4 years for every kid in the state of Michigan. 5% savings. And it doesn't raise taxes on any one of you as individuals. Not a dime. We could pay for this. It would be a game changer for the state of Michigan. That's the vision that we need as a state. That's the optimism that we need to give our kids. And that's the type of value that tax dollars can give that benefit every single one of us. But we need a legislature and a government that's ready to make that a priority. And so that's part of the message that I wanted to bring to you tonight. Over my 13 years in the legislature, I've never seen anything like we have the last couple of years. And I hope we don't see it again. We've got an opportunity to change the course, and I hope that we take that as someone who really cares about education. As someone who goes into her daughter's classrooms. 2 years ago, there were 25 students in my daughter's 3rd grade class. This year in 5th grade, there's 32. I don't know how any teacher can deal with those odds, but maybe we'll hear in a minute what the impact has been on the classroom. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak, and I look forward to your questions.
Yay.
It's a great-looking crowd out there. I really wasn't sure what to expect when I was asked to come speak. I got into teaching just a little bit different than people might expect. I actually graduated from Montague High School in 1991. Dead last in my class, 1.5, grade point average.
Good for you.
So I was that student who was in the office quite a bit, but was positively influenced by a number of my teachers. Mr. Jim Tate, first of all, was really the reason why I became a teacher. So it was interesting that after I finished my military and finished my college degree at Grand Valley, that Brad Tate, his son, and I both interviewed for the 2 openings at Oak Ridge. And we both got hired on the same day. So just a little bit of my background, because I want you to understand that I'm not here to whine and complain as a teacher. I'm passionate about my job. I love my job. The teachers that I teach with at Oak Ridge are passionate about what they do. The teachers that I visit with at conferences and at training year-round are passionate about what they do. If you're not familiar with Oak Ridge is one of the poorest districts in the county. The majority of our students are free and reduced lunch. And the teachers that I teach with at Oak Ridge are proud to be at Oak Ridge because of what we do with our students and the successes that they have. Because a lot of them come from really crummy situations. The challenge is teachers are beginning to feel like punching bags. And if you go back, just years and look at articles in the media, post on Facebook or social media, just back and forth, teachers are beginning to become frustrated. So there's a number of things that are, in my opinion, stacked against teachers being successful in the classroom. The first thing that I think is impacting them is because of the lack of school funding, it's impacting contract negotiations. And what that does immediately is strain relationships teachers and administrators. So right off the bat, you have a poor relationship with teachers and administrators because all of the articles say the same thing. The teachers are the major source of output for funding for schools. We're their biggest spending, as if they're building cars. Sure, that's true. Teachers are the biggest expense. So if you read the articles over and over and over again, because we're the biggest expense, we're the ones who should take the biggest cut. So what we have is we have paying more for our pension, paying more for our insurance, pay cuts. And all of those things are, of course, teachers are aware going throughout the economy. We're aware of those things. However, at the same time that teachers are asked to have those cuts, they're also asked to increase their standards of performance. And I don't know many business models that will ask their employees to increase their performance. Oh, by the way, you're going to make a lot less money next year. So it's tough for teachers because they're being beat up in the media. Not necessarily by the media, but if you scroll down and read those comments at the bottom of the articles, those are the comments that I just absolutely cannot read. Because if I do, they infuriate me. It's upsetting to see the lack of knowledge that people have over school funding. So I just read the articles and I stop there. One of the things that was mentioned earlier was class sizes. We have 7th grade teachers that have 177 students this year. And they're seeing 177 students every day. And our social studies and science teachers teach everybody from special needs students to the highly gifted students. And they're packed to 34. And we have actually, in order to be more efficient, rather than your typical 6-hour day at our building, we have a 7-hour day. So the hours are shortened. So we have more classes that teachers teach in order to fit more bodies in. So it's an interesting thing. The teachers go with it. We're resilient, and we do what we need to do because we're there for the kids. But what you're ending up having is teachers are literally shutting their doors because there's one thing they can't control. They can control what goes on in their classroom. If they shut their door, they can at least do what they can to impact kids' lives. They may not be able to influence the politics of it, but they can influence what goes on in the classroom. An interesting thing with Oak Ridge, and then I'll pass the microphone along because I've been told 5 minutes is what I get. We have one of the poorest districts in the county. Well, we have a part-time social worker who works with K through 12. He's there part-time. We originally, when I started teaching, had 3 social workers who worked with students who came from a situation where they were abused, their parents maybe had alcohol abuse, they maybe were homeless, so on and so forth. We have now a part-time social worker. Not only that, but our counseling staff has been cut, and the roles that they have to do have increased. Our counselors basically have been turned into college preparation counselors, where they no longer meet with students dealing with problems, but their goal is to get as many kids enrolled in college as they can. And that really is their job. And it's an admirable job, but no longer do you sign up for a counselor to go talk to them because you have an issue. And God forbid you have to see the social worker because he's a part-time social worker. He is not paid to be there, but for 3.5 days. And we actually had to fight for him to get that extra half day. And it was an interesting fight that we had to convince our district to give our social worker an extra half day so he could work with the kids. But the district's strapped. They have no money. And they have no money because Lansing is not providing the funds. So an interesting quote, and then I'll pass the microphone. One of my favorite quotes, a Chinese proverb that I read over the summer, and it's one of the favorite things that I like to share with my students. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The best time to plant a tree, if you didn't plant it 20 years ago, is today. And our problem is we're kicking the can down the road as far as investing in our kids. And economists say it. what we're doing is impacting long-term economic growth in our state and in our area. And what we need to do is we need to hopefully reach the tipping point and start investing in education again. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I took more than my 5 minutes, but I appreciate seeing you all here today for a topic that I'm passionate about.
Yay.
My name is Deborah Griffin, and I'd like to start this way to say things that kind of irritate my friends and family. But what I would start by saying is that I am just a mom. And when K-12 funding cuts came down the pipe, and I was a sophomore in Muskegon Public School Systems. When the funding came down the pipe, and our parents were faced with devastating cuts in a school district that is faced with devastating issues, lack of funding, lack of services, lack of everything. The last thing that we need to hear as parents trying to make what we say is the most important decision in our life. And I laughed when we talked about the comments at the end of the articles that talk about education, that talk about our teachers, that talk about funding and whether or not someone is worthy enough to receive the basic, what we feel should be constitutional right, of what I feel should be the constitutional right of each and every child, regardless of economic standing, is to receive a quality education. Now, when the funding came down, my child was still in middle school, and we had a fairly decent PTO. Now, if you read the comments, you wouldn't think that, because there is no such thing as a concerned parent in the Muskegon public school systems. If you just read those articles and then those comments that follow. So when the fundings came, our biggest thing was that I sat in this room in complete and utter fear. This is what we were faced with: complete and utter fear. Reductions in our teachers, reductions in how many buildings were open, how many were being closed, and all of the other things that we knew was coming along with this cut. Now, a lot of parents, the first thing they did was they wanted to run. And we did. We lost a lot of parents when the funding cuts happened. So it was a determination that I had a lot of conversations with parents that was, so if I stay in a community, if I stay in a school district where I know my child may or may not necessarily receive everything that they need in order to prosper, to be able to advance, to be able to go on and move further, am I doing really what people are saying I am? Am I a bad parent? Should I make the decision to run to leave other people in my school district? My daughter's been in the school district since kindergarten. The parents that the kids that she grew up, the parents that I know, I'm Morgan's mom, that's Sally's dad, kind of thing. We lost a lot of parents who were concerned, who were active, who did care. So then we were faced with the fact that this is just overwhelming. It's overwhelming to be in a situation where you have to decide these kind of things based on whether or not what is the best choice for my child. We decided to stay. My daughter has flourished in this terrible school district that everyone says it is. She has flourished. My biggest problem being a parent that goes to the Muskegon public school system is the hypocrisy and the contempt that the politicians, that the administrators, that everyone has about its children and, more importantly, its residents. So the problem being, with more money that was cut, and I'm just a parent, my first indication was, number of butts in the seats to indicate how much money is worthy for a school district in order to survive, then the calculation needs to be changed. Okay, so we voted on something that didn't quite work. So who says we can't then again come up with something that actually works for my kid, for my school district, and for my community? Who says? And that's one of the biggest things that started me, a person that's just a mom, to try to get parents, because one of our biggest things in our school district has to be parent engagement. So what's the definition of parent engagement? Because I looked it up, because I didn't know. I've always been a parent that you definitely know who I am. Okay? But I also know I come from a mom who did not have that kind of capability to be vocal, to be seen, to be comfortable in an environment such like this. I consider myself, in fact, I am one of the first Title I, Title II babies. I come from Birmingham, Alabama, and when I went to school, one of the things, from a single mom, one of the things that I had a problem with is that I could not complete a sentence because I stuttered terribly. Title I, Title II was one of the things that first came down the pipe. Those counselors, those teachers, those people, that's why I have the passion that I have. My kids have no idea, and I make sure they have no idea what it means to be in a situation where you have no possible way of being educated appropriately. But the ability for caring teachers, the ability for there to be provided programs and services, those are the things that took me from a poor, southern, black child, from a single mom, you know those terrible people that care nothing about their kids, to then go on to be educated, to be able to be prosperous, to be able to become a worthy citizen. Now, it doesn't make any sense that people would not want to fund to actually create thinking children. Who would in their right mind not want that? Who would in their right mind want to write off an entire community of children? Who would do that? And that's where my frustration level comes to. And I'll finish here. But when they call and ask to have a parent be on a panel to give their opinions about what they feel personally about the funding cuts, I feel like it's an attack. It has been an attack on not only parents who can or will show up and speak out, but more importantly, it's been an attack on parents who cannot, for the sake of whatever has to be at the level, to be able to show up. But silence has never in the United States meant that people agreed with what was happening to them. Now, can we get a voice? Well, we're trying. In Muskegon Public School District, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get our parents who have felt that they have no voice to try to give them a voice. And that's some of the things that I'm trying to do with Parents Have Power. It is one of our groups that basically came out of us making phone calls to other school buildings when the cuts started coming and saying, hey guys, this is something that is not only just in each individual building, but we are a family. We need to come together. We need to attack this. We need to become political. We need to have a voice. We need to let people know that we're here, and we need to let people know that we are not going to continue to allow them to attack our teachers, to attack our schools, and more importantly, to attack our children.
My name is Steve Keglis. I'm a food board school board member, and I've been more comfortable standing up and all that. I'd like to thank you for your excellent for allowing us to hold this here today. My job the school board member is a serious one. Very fortunate. Newport Schools at one time was well funded. We had a good fund balance. And we're now one of maybe only 2 or 3 schools in the whole county that are positive frame of mind. Still got positive fund balance. So that if we don't do anything significant in the next 2 years, we're going to be threatened. Along with every school district in this county. That's sad. That's my school superintendent sitting in the back. Absolutely. And the school board members, a lot of people say, well, why do you, I mean, I have 3 sons going through Newport schools, you know, like multi-product Newport schools. Why do you want to run? Why do you want to get involved? I think it's a very good time to be in the Board of Education office. Because it's a challenge. We have real passion for the education of the kids in our community. And all the communities. I've sat, I don't know how many times in Senator Hanson's office, and I talked to Marcia and Colleen Lonnie, who are all the representatives, and talked to them about how important the education is. I know it's important because I'm retired from SD War and Scott Paper. And when we were attracting some businesses and businessmen to come into our county at different times, the first thing they want to know is what schools and what the education is like and how they're producing quality students. And they usually go to, unfortunately, Grand Haven, Spring Lake, and that's where they send their kids to schools. Why is that? Because the schools got a better funding, a better tax base, they have more things available to them. They don't live in our community. And that's unfortunate because that's not an even playing field of how we fund the education system. So Muskegon County is already in the deficit mode. The other thing is, spend some time in the schools, the teachers. It's very sad. I used to volunteer a lot because I was able to read the kids and stuff. And to watch these teachers who really care. If you ever got an education, you understand. You really have a passion for trying to educate people, to reach out and help these students go through their education process. When I was in Newport schools, we had 3 or 4 guidance counselors that used to talk about helping us get to colleges and help us jump through all the hoops, get through college scholarships and applications and different job programs and things that were available out there. And I think we have 1 guidance counselor in the high school system that's doing that for about 240 kids each year. They don't have the time. They don't know what's out there. They don't have the time to talk to parents. They don't even have the time to, like you said, answer problems and get involved in the kids' education process. We've done a lot at Newport to try to cut, balance, keep our budget in a real positive light. But it's really hard. Eventually, there's nothing to cut. I mean, teachers haven't had raises the last couple of years. Other step improvements. The secretaries, the janitorials, the bus drivers, all no wage increases the last couple of years. So eventually there is no low-hanging fruit. Now, I'm also proud that Newport is one of the few districts in the county that has privatized the busing, janitorial system, and everything else. As a board, we do want to stay financially above water. But we're being pressured because there's no improvements, there's no money coming in. So eventually, we got to do something. We don't want to put class sizes of 30 kids a person because we know the teachers aren't successful and the kids aren't successful. The other thing is charter schools and cyber schools. Really disappointing. Charter schools get the same funding per pupil as a public school does. But they can be selected. They don't take special needs students. They don't take the kids that are at the bottom end of the grade point average. They section them off. A charter school, we always, sometimes as a parent, I do myself, complain about a kid spending so much time on the computer. Where's the social skills for a child that on the computer to get his education? Where's he going to get involved working with people? I know one thing is, if I was an employer, I wouldn't really want a kid that never interacted with anybody else and never socialized, because it's hard to integrate through the workforce. So what are we doing there? The last thing I'd like to say about privatization, because this is a real serious thing and an important thing to me, privatization is creating another donor hole in our society. If we don't pay people a living wage, we don't give them any benefits, any pensions, what are they going to do when they get 65, 68 years old. Where are they going to live? That's what the pensions did. So provided a way, we got old enough, and I'm one of them, to retire and live in a dignified way. Now, it also doesn't fix the problem with cost of living continue to go up. Your pension doesn't improve, but at least it satisfies and gives some security net for the people that are working. So, for me as a school board member, we take this very seriously. And I know all my other board members do. But the biggest passion we have is trying to keep the education system in a fair flow. The other part that they don't understand is, I don't think the general public understands, is they talk about the lottery, and how the lottery goes to fund public education. Let me tell you, 6.5 cents of every dollar that goes in the lottery goes back to public education. They won't tell you where the other 93.5 cents go. That's pretty sad. I don't see how they can sell that as a way to fund education if the money's not actually going there. So anyway, I appreciate the time and thank you very much.
Before we take questions from the audience, I noticed that we have a candidate for state Senate in the audience. Would you like to introduce yourself, family, and say a couple of words?
Oh.
I'm Kathy Forbes, running for state senate. I live in Hesperia, Michigan, which is opposite Michigan, excuse me. I live in Hesperia, Michigan County. I grew up in Hesperia, going to the Hesperia public school system. And we moved back about 8 years ago before I got into public office, put our girls in the public school system. And they have both worked their way through Hesperia High School and on to college. And I was not prepared to talk, nor was I prepared for this microphone. However, I will just speak for another moment, just so you know a little bit about me. I love Michigan. I love where we live. And I do know, from what I have learned, from what I've read from the economists, and from listening to Senator Whitmer and listening to everyone else here on this panel, the only path that we can get to true economic growth is through education. And I'm also on board with what Senator Whitmer is saying about tuition assistance for our kids getting through high school. I'm in this high school. I see kids still today. I've got a daughter who is a junior in high school still. And I see these kids walking down the hallway in the elementary school with their sneakers not attached because they don't have the money. These kids don't have the opportunities that other students in higher paying school districts have, where the parents have more opportunities. We need to equalize things for these kids because I see it. Parent-teacher conferences, my husband and I are the only two parents in the hallway for the first hour. And when we left, I saw two other parents. We need to encourage these kids to get their education, to go on to something beyond high school. So I'm totally on board with the Senate's 2020 plan, some fashion to assist our kids with something beyond high school, whatever they choose. And that is the direction we need to go for economic growth, because that will give them more jobs, higher wages. And that is where the economy grows and the employers need to hire more people. So thank you very much.
I think we're ready to get questions from the audience. So Stephanie will pass the mic around.
This is a question that goes beyond what you're proposing. It's a question about next August's primary election, at which there's going to be a chance for the public to vote about personal property tax, which really isn't personal. It's a business tax that businesses pay on the property they own, and it's called personal property tax. We're going to be asked to vote whether to repeal that or not, and I'd like you to address what will happen if the public votes to repeal that tax. What will happen to the schools? What do you see coming?
Is this? Oh, all right. Surprises me when it works. I'm used to faulty microphones, and this is the very first class place. I should be surprised. That's a great question, and I suspect because you've asked it, you know a little bit about it. Am I right, or you?
Not enough.
Representative Hovey-Wright says you know a little bit about everything. So,
Not enough.
okay. So, when we went to change our business taxes, what we ended up doing was essentially making sure that businesses don't pay taxes in Michigan. I mean, by and large, there is very little business tax that is paid now here in Michigan. The most onerous piece of the tax that I think everyone agreed on was the personal property tax, which applies only to business actually physically located in Michigan. And so it was a Michigan business tax as opposed to all the other business taxes that we gave away. So there are a lot of Democrats who wanted to have that conversation. Unfortunately, the other side of the equation was first addressed, which benefited a lot of out-of-state business. And now we've got the personal property tax issue looming before us. It's been kicked to the voters for us to have a voice in it on the August primary ballot next year. And I would anticipate that there's going to be quite an interesting debate. But I'll tell you that there will be an impact. By the nature of your question, you know that there's going to be an impact on our schools as well as on our local, our municipalities. So for safety, whether it's public safety or for local roads, but also there will be a big impact on the school aid fund. And that, I can't give you the number off the top of my head. I should have studied that before I came and looked that over, but I just came from a medical marijuana interview, and now I've got schools on the brain, so I wish that I had the exact number for you. But I can get that for you if you'd like me to. I think that this is going to be one of those tough campaigns where we're really going to have to take it upon ourselves to get all the facts before we cast our votes. Because this one is one that there will be a lot of money spent in advertising about how onerous the PPT is, and yet the fallout of what could happen if we adopted this proposal, I think is something that we're going to need to know before we cast our votes. Personally, I need to study the issue a little bit more myself, and I would suspect that everyone does unless you're already on a hired campaign or not. But there's going to be an impact on our schools.
Just a brief addition. Most everybody is against the personal property tax. It's a tax that nobody felt was fair or but those of us on the Democratic side, our main message was it's got to be fully replaced, and it is not. Because the losses go, as Senator Brewer said, to the schools and to the municipalities. So it was not fixed, it was not replaced because they did not want to vote for a tax, some other new tax. And so it's a bad situation, and I agree with Marcia. I'm going to have to study it more myself because when we met with the clerks and the treasurers from all over the county, nobody understood it. I mean, it's very complex. So.
Last week I had a conversation with Dave Sippin, who's the chair of the Intermediate School District here in Muskegon. And he indicated that at Muskegon Public Schools they had I think it was in the business office, they had 9 people doing a certain function. And the Muskegon school said, look, we can't afford to do that anymore, can you take it over? So he said, yeah, we'll go ahead and take it over for you. They're doing the same thing with 5 people. Now, has anybody just go school district by school district and look at it from a standpoint of the effectiveness of the administrators and the people that work in those offices and say, are we really getting the bang for our buck that we should be getting? Because I can take a look at a classroom, a teacher, and I can see what a teacher's doing. That's easy to quantify. But when I go to a business office of any organization, public, private, or whatever, what are those 5 or 10 people in the background doing? Are they really, do we need 10 of them? Can we get 5 or 7 of them? Are they all being really effective? How do we go ahead and handle that? And secondly, has anybody done a study of just how many students are in each class year by year? Because I know that 32 is too much. I can remember my 2nd grade class, we had 25. And that seemed to be just about right, maybe a little. 20 and 25 doesn't seem to be a bad number. But once you start getting up over 30, the teacher just doesn't have the attention to give to all the students, and I think that's unfair. So those two things, a little comment on that certainly would be appreciated. Thank you.
So I can't comment on the Muskegon administration, but I can comment on the school board. Our school board has done everything we can, and we've got the administration down about as low as it can go. I can't give you a point to how many people we also work on combining some efforts. We have our maintenance and equipment manager who's also working with Oak Ridge schools and Motor Shore schools, so we're sharing the cost of paying his salary, so combining some work. We also have our transportation director who shares with Oak Ridge schools for busing and transportation, so it's helping us reduce our costs and helping Oak Ridge fix some of their problems. But again, you can only do so much of that before those persons get burned out and are accumulating too much work. The other question that you brought up is headcount per classroom. In our elementary schools, we kept our class headcount at 25 at all our elementary schools, but eventually when we keep looking at cuts, we're going to have to raise that, and we're looking at having raised maybe to 27 to 28 students per elementary class. And especially at the elementary level, it's very important that you keep those numbers down, because those teachers are the ones that are basing and getting kids started and acclimated to the education process. The other thing that I guess I didn't really talk about either is we have some really gifted elementary school teachers and all teachers in our district. But when you can't pay them the fair wages eventually anymore, you start going to other districts. And when I talk about equalization of funding for schools, we have like a Spring Lake or Grand Haven or Grosse Pointe Hills, East Grand Rapids, where they're getting money from the tax base, and their tax base is higher. We talk about Muskegon County. Muskegon County has a high tuition reimbursement, not tuition reimbursement, but cafeteria, kids' participation, because we have a lot of family dues lunch. We have a lot of low-income kids in our families in our district. That doesn't always occur in some of the other districts. So when they have a high property tax, they have a low distribution for lunches, those kids are getting, the school systems are getting much more tax-based money. So they're able to provide their fund balance that's way more grand than the ones that are in Muskegon County. So I hope that answers your question.
With regard to the optimum number of students in the classroom, we do have there's someone from the ISD here. Marcia, right? Is the ISD doing any kind of study on optimum number of optimum class size in different grade levels?
Not I'm aware of.
Are there any studies out there? I would assume there would be.
I'm not sure. I'm on the administrative side. I'm not on the academic side.
Numbers guy, so. Yeah. But we can probably check into talk to Mr. Sutton and see if there's any resources there.
I would like to just briefly talk about class size. I actually got my first layoff in 2007 on July 3rd. I taught economics for 9 years in the high school, and after 9 years I was still the low guy on the totem pole. So I got my layoff then. So districts have been downsizing, you could say, for at least the last 7 to 8 years. And really what their goal is to increase class sizes because they can't afford to have that many teachers there. This year in our middle school, in our contract, we have a set amount that our teachers can have in their classroom. So elementary teachers, it's based on what grade they're in, because as far as the union goes, it's important that the union protect the teachers to create a good teaching and learning environment. At the secondary level, our cap is 160 per day that secondary teachers can see. And you may remember that I said that our 7th grade teachers are currently teaching 177. So they're 17 over the contracted limit. So then, of course, the district has to get involved in overload pay. Well, it's cheaper for them to pay the teacher overload than it is, for example, to hire our recommendation is to hire a social studies and science special ed teacher because we don't have them at the middle school in those two subjects. So our special needs students, we feel, lose out on those subjects. So our position is hire a special ed teacher to take those students to take away the class size issue where it's dollars and cents, and once again it gets back to creating conflict with superintendents and the staff. And it's conflict that shouldn't be there, but it's there. And it's there based on school funding issues.
I'm just going to quickly say goodbye. Thank you for having me. I was glad to be a part of this. I promised my 10-year-old and 11-year-old I'd get with before they went to bed. And so I'm going to make tracks. But I thank you for your question. And we're going to put together something on the PPT, kind of a fact sheet. And Stephanie, if you'll exchange information with Stephanie, we'll be happy to follow up with you. All right? And that goes for any one of you. I may not represent you in the state senate, but I feel like I represent everyone in the state of Michigan, and if I can be helpful to you, please don't hesitate to call on me. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Oh, yeah, I'm good.
Well, I wonder about asking you a question, but it doesn't matter. In one of the town meetings that Snyder held, I think it was during the last election, I think it was in Grand Rapids, and I just saw part of it where people were asking him about educational funding, and I think we are at 2004 funding at that time. That in 2012, we were actually 8 years behind in terms of the funding level for the schools. And people said, well, what about school districts like Birmingham and Bluefield Hills, where the kids are getting $13,000 a year, when we're being cut back to $6,700 in Muskegon and places around Grand Rapids. And Snyder said, well, we're going to have to address that. That's something that I really want to address, leveling the playing field. And I guess for Marcia, who's the only legislator who's left on the panel, has there been any effort since he made that statement in a town hall meeting to actually put his money where his mouth is and do something about it?
Funny you should mention that. Every May we have a revenue estimating conference. We have another one in it's October. This last one, there was like $500 million more than what we estimated there would be for revenue in there, and that's happened every revenue estimating conference. Never once, every time, the Democrats say, put more money back in education. Let's increase the foundation allowance. And it has never happened. And yet, Senator Hansen's literature recently came out to everybody's house, and it said that they've raised the amount of money per student by, what was it, Mary, $120 per student? I don't remember. But it was, not one penny has been added to the foundation allowance. They have put some money in to fund the retirements and things like that, but not in the classroom. And many teachers, probably many of you here, are funding your own supplies. With less money, more money being taken out for health care and less in retirement. It's just kind of amazing. So no money has been added.
You guys having like your own press conference to kind of put him on the spot as far as not following through on his promises?
We haven't done it yet. That's a good idea.
Follow out because you don't have any power.
We have press conferences all the time. Usually they're focused on the smaller items, smaller things. So.
There's a Mary here. She was kind of anyone on the side. I just want to add a little bit, I guess. School funding, the funding to schools has been being cut for the past 10 years.
Yeah.
It has been cut consistently for the past 10 years, and then it was $400 cut from the foundation allowance. So it has been a dramatic drop, and I think one of the things that's added to it is the fact that I don't think people understand how bad it is, and I think part of the problem is because of schools of choice. They don't want to step on your toe with the superintendent, but the fact is the superintendents are in a position where they can't let people
people know this because they have to compete with each other now. It used to be that all of our schools were important and they all worked together, but now they have to compete for students, so they don't come out and say, we can't do it anymore like we used to because you're not funding us enough. So it's important for people to find that information out somewhere, and that's why I'm saying it. And as far as the personal property tax, I don't think that, I'm sure it is quite complex and there's a lot of details about it, but the fact is, school funding is terrible now, and if we eliminate the personal property tax, it is only going to get worse. That's the important thing about that. It will get much worse. Much less money will be coming in. Thank you.
She's a fireball. Huh?
We'll take it back here.
Karen's prepared.
A couple of comments. One is just a comment and a question. I was backing up a little bit what she's saying. I don't think whether it be the MEA or Democrat or whatever, has sensitized the public on just how bad the cuts have been over the last several years. I still have friends that will make the statement about teachers that raise insurance, zero cost, zero deductible. That's not right. That hasn't been true for a long time, right? And you have to make that statement. So, somehow, publicity-wise, it just haven't reached, everybody in the public, if you will. The other question, I guess, would be, we're all here tonight, we're concerned about this. What can we do now? I mean, my representative's in the room, she's a Democrat. I don't need to write her. I guess I can write the senator. Right? What can we do? What can we do now to get this going rather than, I realize we have a plan, but, this plan probably involves, more Democrats being voted in a year and a half, but now, maybe 2 years, and so on. What can we do today?
First thing I'd like to respond to that is, you're right. I don't think the community and society understands give backs and changes that have given over the last 10 to 12 years. The teachers have sacrificed along with administration and bus drivers and janitors and everybody else that have paid the price for all these cuts in public education. The second thing is when you ask, what can you do? Somebody just talked about my letter to the editor that I sent the other day. Write letters to the editor. Call Governor Snyder. Call Senator Hansen. Talk to your school board. Talk to your school superintendents. Because these are elected positions or appointed positions, and people really do get upset or worried when somebody that they haven't seen or heard from before gives them a call. It's one thing to give an email, but it's a whole other thing to take time out of your busy day, spend a half hour or an hour drafting a letter and sending it to Senator Hansen saying, look, how can you put in your material that you've given a lot of money to public education when the facts are that's not correct? And how can you be elected and misinformed so bad that you can make those kind of statements? Right? Again, also take some time out of your day to go to Lansing. I've been to Lansing a lot of times to talk. Unfortunately, I don't get to see Marcia and Colleen too much because they're already understanding their support of what I'm trying to say. Senator Hansen, go to his office, make an appointment, and go up and see him and say, look, my name is John Doe or Jane Doe, and I'd like to talk to you about public education. I'd like to talk to you about this. I'd like to talk about that. Governor Snyder also, job creation. He said he was going to create jobs. That was a big part of his platform of getting elected. The statistics show he's not done that. And not only not created jobs, but he's not going. Attracting businesses when he doesn't improve the public education system. So, anyway, that's my response.
Just to let you know, there's a couple bills that are in the hopper right now that you may not know about yet. And they're both a work in progress, so I can't give a lot of detail. But one is about retaining any student in third grade if they can't read. Now, the chair of the Education Committee has zero experience in education. She has bragged to me about how she has no computer in her house and she doesn't watch the news. So this is another Sarah Palin. And
Marcia, would that be Senator or Representative
That would be.
As pigs get fed, dogs get slaughtered.
That's the one. I was trying not to mention the names.
You know me, I'll mention names. I've mentioned her on the air multiple times on every show.
So, you know, we got people in Lansing. I don't think anyone on the Republican side and the Education Committee has any experience in education. And they're making decisions that they have no idea how it affects kids. I mean, this would be 32,000 third graders would be retained because they can't read yet. They don't have any understanding of special education or some of the special needs that kids have or anything. And so fortunately they are talking about some exemptions. They're talking about, you know, testing earlier, trying to identify problems so that they can be more successful. So that's a good thing. But if those of you who are educators or superintendents and you have feelings about this, that's one to communicate about, the third grade retention bill. And then there's another one about school evaluation. No Child Left Behind set up a system of ranking schools by color. And now they want to change it to by grade because people understand it better. But it goes way deeper than that and establishes a bell curve so that there have to be failing schools. Because the bell curve goes like this, and there has to be people who goes at the bottom, the top and the bottom. And so there are some problems down the road that, unfortunately, these bills are in progress or in process. So this would be a good time to communicate with your legislator. Just last week, I had like 8 people communicate with me about a bill, and I read their emails. They were not all the same. They weren't the stock answers, which you tend to not look at as seriously. But I changed my vote on that bill because of that communication. So it does make a difference. And my staff communicate back and do all this. More questions?
I think we both wanted to mention what can we do. One of the things I would encourage the public to do is to start having conversation with people about education and the importance of education. And if they're not quite clear on what's going on, to maybe try and help them understand or convince them to call somebody. I was a couple of weeks ago at Mr. B's before school having breakfast. In 2 weeks in a row, I overheard 2 gentlemen having conversations. I don't like to eavesdrop, but anytime they started bashing unions and teachers, the second week I just had to interrupt, and I said, I apologize for interrupting, but I can't sit next to you and listen to you bash teachers and unions. And the guy said, well, I apologize, but I don't like teachers' unions. So I asked him this question. Well, I have my career skills students do an assignment they have a week and a half to do. I give them 7 questions. I give them the questions. They're asking 2 people how they got into their career, and they have a week and a half to do it. 1/3 of my students turned it in. And I asked them, what does the union have to do with that? And then I asked them, well, what about the math teacher who can't convince his math students to practice their math at home? So when he comes back to class, he's assuming that the students have done the work, but they haven't done the work. So we can't move on because 2/3 of the students would be left behind. So our conversation, what do we do now? We continue to talk to the public. We talk to parents and get engaged. We talk to people to call schools and legislatures. We just have to continue to have dialogue with people.
I was going to say I was up here, and go ahead. And I guess I wanted to add to the conversation as well, because I think what I've always found is that the missing ingredient to this, being a parent and not being a politician and not being a teacher, is that the missing ingredient is the parents. But the problem is what we're talking about, the PR. The conversation is not being said, it's not being had. And so everyone is under the impression that the information that they see that's in writing that says everything's fine. The information that people get that, you guys are just completely devastated, you're no good, you're not worth anything, And all those things tie into this void of parents coming together to help the teachers, to help the politicians, to move this message forward. Because to be honest, just having teachers, they can dismiss if it's just teachers. They can dismiss if it's just politicians. But the problem is that if we can come up with some formula, and trust me, for the last a year and a half, I have tried to find the correct formula for my community to get people to understand that, we need to have this conversation, and we need to be at the table with everyone that can make a difference. And more importantly, we need to vote. So the question is, how do we get parents engaged who basically, they had enough time to feel like, yeah, there is really no hope. I'm stuck here until I can do something, or I'm just stuck here, period. Now, the conversation about, what do we have? Now, the Head Start and the early childhood education. On Facebook, there were some parents that are basically trying to get their kids in the Head Start. And what we found out, and this goes into the whole thing of parents really not knowing what's going on legislatively, not understanding the whole impact of how it affects us until it affects us. And so we had 3 parents saying, I can't get my kid in the Head Start. When did they change the requirements? They're saying, I don't qualify because I make enough money. We're in Muskegon. We have 11-some-odd% unemployment, which means we have a double-digit underemployment. How is it possible when I know that I barely live from paycheck to paycheck, and my child cannot get into a program that everybody knows works? Everybody knows it works. So is this by design? Are the programs that we know have the ability for low income, at-risk children, people with children with special needs? The elimination or the basic grounding of the ability for people to function, to be able to provide that to their community, is that something that is by design? And so we need to have this conversation with average people and parents. I know I'm rambling, sorry, but it's just really one of the ingredients that we're really miss in this kind of situation.
Make sure you ask your question, speak right into the microphone so that everyone can hear you.
I just want to be very, very, very clear. Everybody's talking about having conversations with parents. The one point I want to make is the administration that is in office currently, if you write them email, if you go visit them in person, they're not really listening to you. They have their own agenda, and they're not really concerned about what you have to say or what you think. And the only solution when you're having these conversations with parents is to point them to the 2014, 2016 elections and let them know that even though it's an off-year election, that they need to show up and elect people who will listen to them, who are sensitive to their issues, who do care about education. Anything else, unless we get a Democratic majority in the House and in the Senate, anything shorter than that is good people making a great efforts that will fall short. Our focus needs to be right now educating people and informing how important it is to get people in office that represent ordinary, everyday, working class people. Anything shorter than that, we fail.
I'm sure most of you know this, but 2014 is the next election where both House and Senate are up. So Colleen and I are for re-election, and Senator Hansen is going to be running against Kathy Forbes.
I think that, as many people have mentioned, there's been such a media blitz in the last at least 15 years telling us how terrible, awful public education is in America. And they take statistics and twist them. We educate everybody. A lot of the countries that they compare statistics to don't educate everybody at a very high level. They have to qualify to get an academic training in high school. I have a family member who is an executive for a large Michigan company, and they have worked in Asia and India, and now is the president for the company of all of Asia and India. And over the years, in my conversations with her, and why don't people listen to people like her? I don't know. She says that America has the best education in the world because we train our students to think, we train our students to problem solve, we train our students to innovate. She has trained people in China and has a very, very difficult time to get them to solve any problems on their own, to innovate, to think. They all come back to her, what should I do now? How should I write this memo? What should I do? And she has to go over and over and over, and it's been a very difficult challenge. But we've heard so much bad publicity about schools. How can we get the message out there that our schools are good, make people believe in them again? Why would they go out and vote for Democrats if they think they're buying the big lie that our schools are terrible in this country?
Well, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, which I'm still trying to figure out. There are lots of ways that we can get the word out there, and we just have to learn from our kids maybe how to do that.
Here, over in the here.
Hi, my name is Mark. I've been an educator in this area for about 20 years. I've worked in several districts in the area during that time. The big problem that I see going on in Michigan right now is that, and a lot of it has to do with the nature of the legislature and everything is controlled by Republicans. And right now they're taking their marching orders from Mackinac Center and from Allen and from other organizations that are clearly determined to undermine public education in the state. What's going on, and Steve mentioned it quite eloquently, is the privatization of a lot of services and even entire school districts within the state. Now, there's a term that I've heard and I prefer to use instead of privatization. I like to use the term profitization because that's what's going on. These services and districts are being turned over to for-profit companies that have no real interest in providing a quality service. They're more interested in protecting the bottom line. I have a very serious problem with the business model being applied to education. Education is not a business, and it can't be run like a business. We are not creating widgets. We are working with human beings that all have different needs. And when we talk about class size, you can talk about class size all you want. You can have 25 kids in a class. It's not a numbers game. It is a needs game. I'm a special education teacher. I've been working with kids with special needs my entire career. I have been in classrooms where I have had 5 kids who require as much service and attention as 25 kids. So the whole class size argument means absolutely nothing to me. What counts is providing adequate funding to all the schools in the state. The biggest determiner of student outcome is socioeconomic status. I started my teaching career in Shelby, and I worked at the Ferry School before they closed it down. I had kids in Ferry who came from homes with dirt floors and no running water. We used to wash their clothes at the school for them because they were not able to do that at home. Now, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which some of you might be familiar with, any kid who's coming to school hungry, poorly clothed, maybe coming from an abusive household, is not going to be able to pay attention and get to page 45 in the math book like you want them to. That's where the cuts in the social services come in. The half-time counselor, social worker for the entire district. The one social worker for an entire district. The no social worker in Muskegon Heights for the first 3 months that I worked there. When I had a room full of EI, elementary school students who on their IEPs had social work and weren't getting it. That's the problem. You have to provide these services. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, and I don't think there's anybody in this room who probably disagree with me about this. But we need to increase student funding. That's the bottom line. There's nothing that's going to take care of this problem more than money. And I get really tired of people saying you're throwing money at school districts, waste money. They do not. School districts squeeze every penny that they get as hard as they can. So what I would ask of the legislators here and people who are interested in education is make this case that schools are not a business. They can't be run like a business. Kids are not widgets. They can't be standardized. They can't be crammed into these boxes and measured with these metrics. If you want standardized kids, give them standardized tests. I don't want standardized kids. I want kids who can think for themselves. And I want kids who are going to be productive members of society and not kids who are getting stuck in a cycle of poverty because they're not getting a good education. Because they come from communities of poverty. Where are the good schools? They're in good communities. Where are the poorly performing schools? Almost all of them are in school in communities where there are high rates of poverty. What's the common denominator? Poverty. So we have to work on lifting all these boats and getting the schools the money they need, and especially the schools in the high poverty. Those are the ones that need the extra support. Those are the ones that need 12 social workers. They need 2 social workers for every school. Don't give them half a social worker. That doesn't work. So, and especially the special education fund. We've got to work on getting that money out of the federal government. We've got to work on getting that money out of the state government. Otherwise, we're leaving kids behind, left them. So I don't know if you want to parse the question on that. Those are just some points that I wanted to make. If you haven't been in the classroom, you haven't had that experience. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have just a couple more people, 1 or 2 more questions here. 2 most at most. The gentleman over here would like to ask him, Mary would like to finish it up, and then we're going to go ahead and have the representative give our closest.
Thank you. I think I'm probably one of the few people in here that doesn't draw some sort of compensation through a school system by way of pension or superintendent or teacher. So I realize that. Those of you that are teachers and are part of the school system, I recognize that you have a very difficult job that you're doing, and you're doing it remarkably well. This gentleman that just spoke up from Whitehall, I am the person that will take issue with that. Money does not necessarily translate into better education. Same thing that goes with what Mr. Keklovitz said. If you look at the per student funding, which I did while we were looking here, the 2 highest funded school districts in the area are the Heights and Muskegon High School. Are they producing the type of results that should be coming from receiving over $12,000 per student? Probably not. Okay, well, the numbers that I looked at indicate 12,293 for Muskegon, 13,118 from Muskegon Heights. This is based on the 2010 or 2011 number. There's a website here. I'll be happy to provide it for you. And this is the same information I've seen in the Chronicle.
It must be true. There's a website.
Well, Mrs. Griffin or Miss Griffin, you have done, obviously, a great job. You have indicated that your child or children are flourishing. You're in the Muskegon School District, which is spending a lot of money, but not necessarily producing the results that other school districts are. It comes down to parenting. You talked about it. You're an involved parent. What needs to happen is the parents have to get more involved. Those of you that are teaching, that are part of the school district, you are doing a great job with what you have. But you have parents that must get more involved, like Mrs. Griffin here.
How many teachers do we have in the room? How many non-teachers?
Well, anyways, parenting is really the key to this. Otherwise, your children would not be flourishing the way that they are. And to avoid...
Although I am not going to say that parents are not the most important thing as far as education, I will say that that equation is more, it's black and white. That is a simple equation to use to say that that's the only thing that makes a difference between a school district that flourishes as far as producing the quote-unquote number that they say indicates that it is flourishing. Now, I say that because of this. I'm an involved parent, and my husband is an involved parent. But I and him both are products of parents who did not understand what it meant to be involved in school and what you needed to do in order to tailor a child who may have a special need issue, or may have a learning disability, or may be below level reading. So there was a learning curve that had to happen, not only my parents, but a lot of parents today. So it's not such a black and white situation where you can say that because I am involved, that in of itself is an end product of my child being successful. Because I take the sheet.
And the gentleman from Whitehall here, I agree with you on the socioeconomic. Clearly that is there. But throwing money at the problem is not necessarily the answer to this. It comes down to getting the parents involved. And as legislators and superintendents, I sure hope that you're doing something to encourage parents to be more involved. And since I think that money is not necessarily the root of the problem here or the solution to the problem, what about things like Common Core? What's good about that? What's bad about that? And what is the status of that right now? Thank you.
Just briefly, because it's 7:30, brief comment is it's a little more challenging to legislate parenting, where it is a little easier to take care of my students who have parents who are in, so I have a student who started the first day of school, and 2 weeks before that, her dad was incarcerated because he killed somebody. So with a part-time social worker, lack of counseling, and huge class sizes, of course, parenting is important, but it's hard to legislate. What would money do? Money in our school district would give us a full-time social worker, or 2 social workers, or a full-time counselor, or decreased class sizes so teachers can create those meaningful relationships and connections with their students. So that way students become productive, just like I was connected to Mr. Jim Tate, which is why I became a teacher. It's tough to do that when class sizes are where they are. So just a brief comment for your statement.
I've heard that, we can't just throw money at it. Money won't solve the problem. I've heard that in Lansing. And that's how we got where we're at right now. And with, reform after reform, which tends to, so far, it's all been in a negative way, at least from what I've seen. I think we have time for one more question. Unless you want to go away.
I just want to add one thing. I just hear people say, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? And there is a small group of people that is trying to do something. If anyone would like to join us, Citizens Preserve Public Education, and you can talk to me afterwards if you're interested. I just wanted to make sure because I'm just feeling we got to do something, and I agree. And if we can't do it alone, but maybe together we can. And maybe one thing we can do is have a forum like this with our senator.
We always do encourage this wonderful debate in the community, and that's what these are for. And so if anyone would like to, I don't want to waste up or have everyone sit here the rest of the night, but if anyone wants to continue debate, I'm sure that we can
Just to address the Common Core curriculum and also what funding can do, we always talk about Head Start. In Newport, we have 200 kids. We can't get involved in the Head Start program and early childhood development because we don't have the money to do it. So we all know it works. We just don't have the teachers or the facilities or the money to do it. The other thing is Common Core curriculum. Not every kid, that's why this Career Tech Center is so neat. Not every kid wants to go to college. You get a 4-year degree, you move on. A lot of kids want to do mechanical drawing, woodworking, metal shop, get involved in all mechanics. You know what? Governor Snyder is making it impossible to have that kind of curriculum because we're focusing on science, math, do stuff with their hands. They want to do other opportunities. But with Common Core curriculum, they can't do that. Schools aren't getting funding to support that kind of system. So that's why the career tech center.
So what's the status of Common Core and what is the funding?
It was passed. The Department of Education is responsible for the implementation. We don't have time to go into it anymore. But one last question. Yes.
If we were listening to direction, she said 5%. If we could find 5%. Now, what?
That's for higher ed. That's for fund.
Okay.
That's for college. And I'm a sponsor of the bill in the House.
All right. But the real problem is that politically we don't have the will to fund education because of the political parties that are dominating right now. They don't have the political will when you can spend billions of dollars on a war where they say that there are weapons of mass destruction and there's no weapons of mass destruction, and you won't spend money on education. I feel that it's the political will of this country that we are not funding education.
Yeah. And I guess at this point I'd like to thank everyone for your thoughtful questions and for your patience and for coming out tonight. This is a fantastic crowd. So thank you all.
Your buddies from
Wonderful
MLA.
job. Jeff Loman.
I noticed that.
And Steve Keglitz. And of course,
He's probably all throwing those advertisements in my driveway. I'll probably have a bushel basket of them
we didn't
tomorrow.
have enough of the task force reports. I apologize. But you can get them off the internet.
You know, I wrote an email to the North
The
Michigan
website
Police.
is housetaskforce.com.
I just asked them to
And then
let me
click
know how
on
that
school
started.
reform. You can print your
I
own
didn't have
copy.
it back yet.
Okay? And then this, if you don't have one of these, this will help you get my newsletter, my e-newsletter that comes out 4 or 5 times a year. So if you don't get it right now, pick one of these up and you need to fill out the card or just go to the website and click on e-newsletter.
That's
Whoever
cool.
wants to sign for it, it's up right here.
Good for you, Larry.
Email.
She's all right. She's good.
Marcia, do you want to announce the meeting on Friday? The open house?
Can I announce an event that has only temps?
No, you can't.
No. Because that's...
That doesn't mention talk about that.
Yeah, I'll